All right. Well, welcome everyone here. We got a pretty good crowd here in the Chit Chat channel. For those that don't know me, I'm Ken, and I'm going to be the host this week. I usually host these things with Jasper. We alternate, but I'm very excited today because we've got a couple of guests from the team. As always, we're joined by Langers. Good morning, good afternoon to you, Langers. How you doing?
G'day, how's it going?
It is going good. I'm also very excited because we are joined for the first time in a very, very long time. It seems like it's been way too long. We're joined today by Joe. He's our special guest today. So welcome, Joe.
Yes, I emerge from the depths of version 2 Landia now that it's just about good to go.
It is so great to have you back on the call. I feel like I've missed you, man. It's we didn't get to see it.
Yeah, every waking hour has basically been dedicated to this thing, and it's paid off pretty well. I'm happy with it.
Okay, so bring us, for the rest of us that have been living under a rock and we only see little tidbits of you and screenshots about this. Help me understand what is version 2, why does it matter, when is it coming, and what does it have to do with Houston?
Oh geez, how long do I have?
As long as you like.
Okay, hope you guys are sitting down, grab a drink and some popcorn, man. I'll try to keep it brief. So version 2 is basically a reimagining of the smart node with the context of what we've learned over the last 3 years and how the execution layer and the beacon chain have evolved over the last 3 years. Like when the smart node first launched, there was no merge. There wasn't even the quick merge. It was still just sort of like a pipe dream, knowing that at some point, Beacon is going to give you your ether back, and we have no idea how it's going to happen. We just know it's going to happen, and that kind of stuff. And since then, a lot of things have changed, and we've learned a lot of things that we really wish we could put into the smart node, but it's just very, very difficult to do. So, perfect example. One of the things I think that we get as far as like the most requested feature is, when are you going to do web UI? Why can't I do a web UI? I want, it's 2024. I can't believe I'm in a console right now dealing with the CLI. Give me a web UI, right? We hear it. We hear it all the time, loud and clear, this last couple of years. But the way that Smart Node version 1 was designed really did not lend itself well to making a web UI. In Smart Node version 2, we have completely redone the way the backend system works to actually expose it as an HTTP service, which means that it's very easy to create a web UI for it. Now, I'm not a front-end guy, so I don't have a web UI right now, but the plumbing is there so that somebody smarter than me can actually put one together and hook it up very easily. And we actually have some ideas for that, pretty much. So that is one example. There's another good example. Go doesn't, well, now, like Go itself, the language that the smart node is written in, has evolved significantly since the original smart node was first built. Now we can take advantage of a programming construct called generics, which allows us to basically make types depending on a particular type instead of just being whatever, and you have to cast it to what you assume is right. So we'll call it the maintainability of this smart node goes up significantly with version 2 as well. Stuff that we would normally have to like go in and kind of fix, and things that were a little, we'll call them duct taped together pretty much, have been solidified and made much more robust in version 2. So that's much easier to find what's going wrong and fix things. We actually have a new logging system, for example, that allows you to capture everything that's happened in a very lovely, clean way, and it allows you to search for what's going on in a lovely and clean way as well. So that's going to help out both the users and the support staff. And one of the big things we have in Rocket Pool is like our support channel, right? These tireless guys that come in and help everybody that has these weird questions. This will go a long way towards getting them the answers they need very, very quickly. Things like that. Another good example is Smart Node now supports the ability to bundle multiple transactions together and fire them off at once instead of waiting for each transaction in sequence if you're sending a lot. So, for example, if you got like 20 mini pools and you want to do a reward distribution on those, in version 1, you pick all the mini pools and you say, all right, fire off transaction number 1, distribute, wait for it to finish. gonna take a couple of minutes. Okay, there it is, done. Fire off number 2. We gotta wait for it, and then fire off number 3, and the whole process takes a really long time. In Smart Node version 2, it asks you how many you want to claim, and you pick whatever you want, or all of them, and it does all of them at the same time, and then just waits for them in parallel instead of in sequence. So it's much, much faster when it comes to dealing with these sort of like batched transactions and stuff. There's a lot that goes into it. I mean, I'm not going to just go through and kind of read the diff notes to you. They're actually up there on the interwebs for public consumption to see what's new. But long story short, a lot of the feature requests people have given us that we just couldn't do with the existing architecture, and a lot of things that we personally, as engineers working on the Smart Node, really wished we had, all of that is now in version 2. Pretty much. I mean, there's still some stuff coming down the pipeline that Patches has for things like modularization and making life a little cleaner for testing and things. It's not quite there yet, but it's going to be as well. Suffice to say, even as it is today, it's a much nicer version of the Smart Node, both from the user's perspective and from the engineer's perspective. I'm happy with how things are played out so far. So, how does that answer your question?
I'm sold on it. So I guess the next question is when version 2? Do we get it before Houston, after Houston?
So version 2 was not built with Atlas support. We made the decision early on that it wasn't going to be worth building in like right now the Smart Node can gracefully transition from Atlas to Houston. It has both versions of the protocol built into Smart Node version 1. Version 2 doesn't have that. Version 2 is based purely on Houston. With all things considered, we probably could have taken some time to do that now, but it would have come at the cost of some other stuff. So at the end of the day, I'm not terribly, I don't miss it too much. But version 2 only works with Houston. So in order to use version 2, you have to have Houston as a testnet, and I think that's actually coming fairly quickly now. We're looking like we're wrapping some things up, and we should be able to put that up on the public Haleski testnet soon. So as soon as you do that, basically all I have to do is tag version 2 as beta 1 and release it to the wild, and you guys can go play with it. There's no reason to do it before then because you can't use it, but as soon as that's up on the public, or as soon as Houston is up on the public testnet, it'll be, free reign. You guys can do whatever you want with it.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, I know that's definitely a question I have for Langers a little bit later here is the Houston timelines, and I know we got to be getting pretty close to releasing it and deploying the contracts on Haleski, right? And so, Joe, am I understanding correctly that as soon as we have Houston on Haleski, those in the Rocket Pool community here that have a testnet node, we can get a hold of V2. It's done. It's ready to go.
Yeah, it's pretty ready to go. I mean, it's all we're doing right now is like little cleanup things, little so Patches has a bunch of CI stuff he's done to like catch little errors that weren't handled properly, or log messages that weren't formatted properly, that kind of stuff. All that's in there. As far as I am concerned, it is in a beta 1 friendly format. If there are bugs, that's fine. That's why it's a beta. But it's usable enough that people can try it today. So basically, as soon as Houston launches on Haleski, I will push this thing up and let people play with it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm totally excited. Let me switch topics just slightly here because I know we have you in the beginning of today's chit chat, and I want to be respectful of your time. But the other question I was going to ask you, and I certainly invite Patches to comment as well here too, is I saw that there were a couple of proposed changes to the reward tree, a version 9, a version 10, and they seem to be somewhat interconnected, I think, with Houston and some changes. Can you kind of explain it to me like I'm 5? What are these reward tree rules, and what's the difference between V9 and V10? And I'll kind of direct it at both of you to see if you can both explain this to me.
Well, V9 doesn't require Houston. Patches, you want to talk about V9 first?
I can certainly do that. I'll try and be quick because the V10 proposal's got a lot more in it that people might care about. V9 is largely just a proposal to formalize what it is that the ODAO does at the end of a rewards period. So on rewards night, right now, the ODAO will wait for the snapshot to elapse, and they'll sort of look at the state of the chain, collect all the mini pools, analyze all of their performance to generate a rewards tree. And that rewards tree has the RPL and the smoothing pool ETH in it. And then that's all very well defined. We have a very well written spec for it that I think Joe wrote originally in the Rocket Pool Research repository. It's been turned into an rPip by Ramana. Up to that point, everything's very clear cut. There's multiple implementations that we've had pop up over the years. I think Ramana has one. Pretty sure Paris used to have one as well. The stuff that happens next is a little bit murkier. So the ODAO has to come to consensus on a Merkle root. And that Merkle root is just the root of the rewards tree that's in the file. And that is also very well defined and also exists in the specifications. But what isn't well defined is the IPFS CID that the ODAO votes for. So the IPFS CID currently is basically the rewards tree in a JSON format that's not specified, that is then compressed with a compression algorithm called ZSTD. And it's given a specific file name and uploaded to IPFS in a specific format. And none of that has been specified to date. So if you wanted to sort of make your own implementation of Watchtower for your ODAO seat and have that implementation generate trees using different code from the rest of the ODAO, which is healthy for the network, of course, you would have to backwards engineer all of that and figure out how to calculate the CID and how to do the compression. And you sort of lose out on some of the benefits of having your own implementation, because one of the weird gotchas in there is that the library that SmartNode uses to compress the JSON file before it calculates the IPFS CID is not stable across versions, which basically means that you can't reproduce what it makes. And if you're using that library, you have to use the exact same version of that library as the rest of the ODAO. So in order to make the IPFS CID reproducible and able to be specified in an easier way, we have to get rid of compression or find a stable compression algorithm. I chose to just get rid of compression. If we don't use JSON, which is a very inefficient format, we can get the sort of space savings from compression back just by using a binary format. We also drop the proofs from the file. So right now the JSON file has a list of every single node and it has the Merkle proof for every single node. In the list of every single node and their rewards, you can actually recompute the Merkle root and the Merkle proofs. So you don't need to encode them in the file. You can just sort of calculate them on demand. So that gets the file size back down. And if you use that, I ended up choosing SSZ because it's an Ethereum native format. If you use the SSZ format and you use the specification that is in the rPip, you produce an artifact that is roughly the same size as the compressed JSON. So there's no real space trade-off here. And that's in its uncompressed form. Of course, you can still compress it later. So if you calculate the IPFS CID from the uncompressed format, it means you have to upload the uncompressed format to IPFS, and that's fine. It's the same size, so it doesn't cost anything extra. But then you can still compress it using the same library later and upload the compressed version to GitHub or some cloud storage or something. And SmartNode can be smart enough to decompress it. So you actually do get quite a bit of space savings, and it'll be quite a bit smaller. And we like it makes it faster to parse, it makes it faster to download. So in general, this is a non-functional change. We're going to continue producing the same JSON format for tooling. Websites like Rocket Sweep and Sprocket Pool both parse the JSON files. And we'll give those tools quite a long time, essentially, to transition to the SSC format if they choose to. But for a node operator, you won't notice anything different unless you are installing SmartNode for the first time, say, and you have to go download 300 rewards trees from GitHub because it's whole ski and the reward period is only a few days. That process will be a lot faster now.
Okay, perfect. And I think I'll probably have the same question for Joe, but maybe you answered it at the end. There's something, as a node operator, there's nothing I need to do. Yeah, I saw you posted a comment. We don't even need to comment on that. It's just, this is a technical change for improvement and no change in practice of node operator is needed. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you're a node operator who's very hands-on and you've in the past gone on GitHub and sort of scrolled through the rewards tree to look for your entry, that might move somewhere else. It might not always be on GitHub. That information will still be made available to you. But if you're just a node operator that, once a month you go and you run your claim rewards command to check how much you've earned and you either claim or don't claim, there's not going to be any difference to you other than that it might be a little bit faster.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much for that kind of description. And then Joe, then what is the relationship with V10 and how does that play in?
Yeah, so I'll try to keep this one brief too, although I'm famous for not doing so. So version 10 is a rewards update that actually does change the rules of how rewards are calculated and generated. It technically doesn't need V9. It can live like orthogonally to it, but Patches and I decided it's best to do V9 first and just make V10 kind of like build on top of that. So that it's we don't have to worry about any ambiguity of what comes first and what happens if one is not approved and the other one is, that kind of thing. Anyway, so what 10 does is basically it takes into account one of the new features introduced in the Houston update. So that's called the RPL withdrawal address. And so right now in Atlas, everybody has the ability to set what's called a withdrawal address, right? It's this supplementary address that takes all of your Ether and your RPL rewards, whatever you get for your node. That way, whenever you want to claim your rewards, they don't go to your node, which is a hot wallet, which could provisionally be problematic if somebody manages to gain access to that. Shout out to V2 because V2 has passwordless mode, so it doesn't necessarily need to be a hot wallet anymore. Anyway, besides the point. The thing that we've done in Houston is we have a secondary withdrawal address now. So what you have now is being moved to what's called the primary withdrawal address. And that is where all of your Ether and RPL is going to go, unless you also have this new thing called an RPL withdrawal address secondary setting. If you have one of those set, then your primary is only going to get your Ether rewards. And your RPL is now going to go to this secondary address, the RPL withdrawal address. Right, that's the intent of it.
And those, Joe, those are the upgrades coming in Houston, the ability to have separate RPL and ETH. Okay.
Exactly. It's one of the things we do in Houston. It's an opt-in setting. You don't have to do it if you don't want to do it. It's mostly meant to be used, I think, by nodes that don't supply their own RPL, but they have somebody else apply on their behalf, right? So we talk about this thing called a whale marriage a lot that has these splitter contracts where all of the rewards go to this contract and the contract sends the Ether to one place and the RPL sends the RPL to another place. It's like that, but it's baked directly into the protocol. As a consequence of this, one of the things is if you want to claim your rewards from the Merkle rewards distribution stuff, like if you do Rocket Pool node claim to get your rewards from the tree, and it lists the intervals and how much RPL you've earned and how much Ether you've earned from the smoothing pool, that whole thing. If you have an RPL withdrawal address set and you try to do that, what's going to happen is you will see the rewards and they will be in that list, but you can't actually claim them. Only the RPL withdrawal address is allowed to claim them. It's not inherently terrible by itself, but it becomes an issue when the RPL withdrawal address is responsible for claiming those rewards because the smoothing pool Ether is tied to those rewards. And the RPL withdrawal address is not supposed to have dominion over the smoothing pool Ether, and in this case it does. So version 10 is a modification to the way that rewards trees are generated, so that if you fall under this particular condition where you have an RPL withdrawal address set, and for technical reasons, if you also have a primary withdrawal address set that's different from your node, then version 10 will actually take your earnings and split them. Instead of just creating an entry in the rewards tree for your node that has your Ether earnings and your RPL earnings, what it'll do is it'll create two different entries in the tree. One for your primary withdrawal address, which has the Ether only in it, and then one for your RPL withdrawal address, which only has your RPL in it. That way, the RPL withdrawal address can claim its portion of the rewards, and the primary can claim its portion of the rewards. And they are split properly, and so we don't have this whole contention over dominion and things like that. all well and good. It has an interesting kind of like side benefit, which is that if multiple nodes have the same primary withdrawal address, or if they have the same RPL withdrawal address, then all of the rewards for those nodes are consolidated together into one entry in the tree, meaning instead of having to claim those rewards once per node, now you just claim them once, period. So it turns lots of transactions into one transaction, which is helpful for people that want to build on top of it. Like NodeSet, for example, says they're excited about this because it dramatically reduces their gas costs. That's kind of neat. But it's not like the main intent of it. The main intent of it is to fix this other thing. That's just kind of a side benefit, but it's worth mentioning. There are a couple of considerations when you do this, though. So the first is if you do this, it means you can't claim rewards from your node anymore, which isn't a problem per se because the rewards don't go to you in the first place. They go to the primary and the RPL withdrawal address. But it doesn't mean you can't claim anything from your node anymore if that's a concern. And it also means that the RPL withdrawal address can no longer do the claim and stake process that you may be used to today, where you can claim your RPL rewards and restake them for your node in a single transaction to save on gas. You can't do that because now the whole consolidation thing means that it doesn't know which node it would be staking for. It doesn't actually work. The whole thing, the only reason this whole thing works is because of a very odd quirk of the way that withdrawal addresses are defined in the contracts. So what this does is, for the first time in I think recorded history, this will end up creating a rewards tree that has entries in it that are not registered nodes in the Rocket Pool network. They're like arbitrary addresses, right? Like if your primary withdrawal address is not a node, it's just your MetaMask wallet or your hardware wallet or whatever, then that's not a node, and it will still work in the tree. You can still claim rewards for that using that address, just because of like a weird quirk. And so we're taking advantage of the fact that that actually works to do this in the first place. But that's, in a nutshell, that's basically what V10 is proposing. So for 99.9% of nodes, it's not going to matter. It's going to be exactly the same. Rewards are going to be unaffected. Claims are going to be unaffected. It's only relevant for people that happen to use this new RPL withdrawal address feature, and it makes things cleaner for them.
Oh, excellent. And then just to help me understand a little bit of timing on this thing, is the intention, we've got a rewards period here coming up on May 8th, and I believe Houston is still targeted for May 26th, 24th, somewhere in there. And then, and then we have one afterwards, June 5th. Is the ideal that you would do version 9 on this rewards claim and then allow Houston and then go to V10? Or do you know the sequencing or the timing of these?
I mean, you could. So V9 and V10 can actually coexist. Like, they can hit at the same point because they don't... V9 doesn't change the rules, it just changes the format. And V10 just changes the rules but not the format. So you can do them together, and we could just like skip straight to V10 if you wanted to. The way V10 is designed, it could actually work today if you decided, because there is no RPL withdrawal address today, and the rules treat everything the same if there isn't one. So theoretically, like, once we go through the whole process or whatever, let's say something terrible happens, Houston gets delayed, you can still do V10 even before Houston, and it's no big deal. So as far as timing goes, it doesn't really matter to me. Like, it would be amazing if we did it before Houston just so we had it there so people don't ever have to deal with this, but I don't really expect a whole lot of addresses to use the whole RPL withdrawal address thing immediately after Houston in the first place. And it only really comes into effect if you've got like more than like one person using it or whatever, right? So it's kind of ancillary to me when it hits. The earlier the better, but it's not going to make or break anything if like the first interval of Houston doesn't happen to use it, for example.
Okay. And then just one last question. Do you need anything from the community on this, or... I mean, everything sounds good, but do you need to verify
like
that?
always, you want to get people's feedback. You want to get eyes on it. You want to see that people are actually looking at it. They approve, they disapprove, they looked at the spec, it makes sense to them, or there's like some incongruity in the logic that doesn't actually work that they want to highlight or whatever. The more eyes, the better, pretty much. So, I guess so I know version 9 and version 10 both have posts up on the DAO forum. They both have pull requests up in the RPIPS repository. Wherever you guys are comfortable providing your feedback and exploring things, go forth and provide. That's really all I can say. So I just...
Okay, awesome. And then Joe, before we leave you here and kind of start directing some questions to Langers, is there anything else you'd like to kind of share with the community about either stuff that's exciting you or that you're working on, or things that we haven't covered?
I don't think so. I mean, V2 or Smart Node V2 and Rewards V10 are mostly the things that I've been working on. It's nice to be able to come back to the surface now that they are quote unquote done, or done enough to be usable at least, and start involving things again. So it's, yeah, thanks for having me. I'll say that much for sure. But I don't think there's anything else that I need to touch on.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure to have you back. Everybody just loves hearing from you. And yeah, I'm excited to get up my hands on V2, and I'm going to try to break it as hard as I can. So,
attaboy. Oh, and obligatory reminder, if you are doing that, do not post your grievances or questions or whatever in the support channel. That is reserved for version 1 only. There is a beta feedback channel explicitly designed for this kind of thing. Please use that instead. I'll be sure to put that in the announcement when I release it.
yeah, you'll have to. There are so many threads upon threads in this Discord. You'll have to point me exactly where it is, otherwise I'll never find it. But excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, Joe. And let me now ask Langers a little bit. A couple of questions here, actually, quite a list of questions. And maybe Langers, can we start with Houston and give us an update on it? What are we looking at in terms of our go, no go, and launch, and kind of bring us up to speed on that one?
Yep, awesome. I'm putting out an announcement today about the testnet deployment. So we will be going to testnet. Well, actually, we'll be deploying the contracts today, and we'll be putting out a smart node release today that will be Houston compatible. But the actual release to testnet will actually be on Monday. So we will raise the proposal to today, and then the testnet ODAO will vote on it, I think, on Friday, and then we will execute the update to the testnet on Monday. So I'll put out an announcement today. I want to try and make sure we get the smart node release out first, so that I can kind of have a release to point beta testers to. But essentially, yeah, that's kind of like the ordering. So we'll get a smart node release out, which will be like 1.13.0. I'll put out the announcement that people can use that to test on Holsky, and to kind of get ready, I suppose. Make sure we give beta testers forewarning on that the upgrade is coming, and then yeah, we kind of raise the proposal and execute the upgrade on Monday. So yeah, I think you've got a bit of bread there because I haven't put out the announcement yet, but that's essentially the kind of timeline that we're working on for. The other things that are working in the background, the audit teams are like ChainSafe, I think, are just finalizing their report properly. So eventually they are going to make, both audit teams are going to make those reports public. So we'll get those out this week. And we also want to do the Immunify stuff this week as well, which will probably actually be like today or Friday, I would imagine. Yeah, so that's the things that are kind of going on at the moment. It's quite busy.
Yeah, just a little busy there. And so you thought, sorry, as I was taking notes here, you thought the audits that were done by, this time it was 3 firms, those might be available by when?
I want to make them public this week, so sometime this week.
Okay, excellent. I mean, that sounds good. And then how are you feeling about the overall kind of trajectory for a mainnet launch on May 26th? Is that still consistent with making the milestones for that launch?
Yeah, no, that seems good. We'll have about 2 weeks of beta testing, and so if we can kind of engage the community around that, and make sure that we get a decent amount of beta testing, then yeah, I'd be confident with the release date that we've set so far. Obviously, there's a lot that could come out of beta testing, but we will have to see how the beta testing phase comes out. But the idea is that should basically be refinement during the beta testing phase, and then we move into releasing to mainnet.
Okay, and then understanding the timeline for the beta test here, it's a version 1 smart node that comes out that's Houston compatible. You deploy Houston, but it's really the ODAO members on testnet that vote for approval. You don't actually activate it or deploy or whatever the correct word is until next week. And then presumably sometime next week, Joe can release V2 for the beta tester. So we could play next week, not only with the new contracts on Husky, but also the new smart node client. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so there's going to be a bit of a we obviously need a fair amount of testing on the V1 client, because that's going to hang around for a little bit. But we also want to get a decent amount of beta testing on V2 as well. So probably from a beta testing perspective, it might be a bit of a choose your own adventure, because you can choose to do V1 or V2. But yeah, that's kind of the plan. The V2 relies on Houston, as I believe, from Joe. So that will have to come after Houston. But yeah, that's the idea.
Okay, way cool, way cool. Now help me with understanding one other thing here is so how will life be different post Houston? I guess there were some questions regarding about, do we still have the PDAO guardian? I guess there's the Security Council, but I guess it's got a default if we don't have it in place. And what about voting? Are we still going to do snapshot voting afterwards? Like how does life change for us as node operators post Houston on mainnet?
Right. So I'll kind of do it from a few different angles. So as a node operator, life doesn't really change. So well, okay. So from a node operator, as in operating your node, it doesn't really change. You'll have access to some new features. So you'll be able to stake ETH on behalf of. So you'll be able to credit your node from another address. You'll potentially be able to use the RPO withdrawal address if that's something that you're interested in using. So from operating your node perspective, things are not going to change. You just upgrade and everything will kind of roll along as usual. From a node operator perspective, in terms of governance, that obviously does change because we're implementing a governance system. So there's a few things that we're actually, once we get it out on testnet. So actually, Snapshot doesn't have a Husky implementation, so it's really hard for us to do that at the moment. But what we're looking at is we're going to see what we're doing about Snapshot. I think essentially Snapshot will still be used for it'll still be used for signaling, because it's gasless. So there's you don't have to pay gas for that. So it makes sense to use that on an ongoing basis. The only thing that we're kind of deciding, and obviously with we need to interact with the PDAO on this as well, is whether is how the delegate system kind of works. Because obviously we've got this new on-chain system that has a delegate system. So it's how we kind of consolidate the Snapshot delegation with the on-chain delegation. So that's something that we're going to be working on over the next week or two. So that's definitely so. But so from a voting perspective, you'll still vote on Snapshot votes as they come up. The only real difference is that when there is a Snapshot vote that requires an on-chain vote to, I guess, formalize, then you'll also then use the on-chain voting system to make that on-chain change. So that I don't see happening that often, but that's how the PDAO will enact its power on-chain, is through the on-chain voting system. And so, and again, from a creator's perspective, early on, you'll probably do similar what to most people do at the moment, and that is you'll assign a delegate. Well, actually, sorry, you'll initialize your voting. All of this is going to be in a Medium article that we're putting out very soon. So Dave's working on that at the moment. But essentially, what you'll do is you'll initialize your voting power, and then you'll set a delegate. And actually, in actual fact, you can do that at the same time. So you'll initialize your voting and set your delegate. And then if you are delegating to yourself, then you will actually do on-chain voting from your node. And if you are delegating, then your delegate will actually do the votes for you anyway. So so that's similar to the snapshot system, but it's slightly different, I guess. So that's from a governance perspective. As from a protocol perspective, I think there was something you touched on in terms of the protocol.
Oh, I was asking about the
Guardian. Yeah. So in terms of the Guardian, so what this does, so the idea is the on-chain PDAO takes away like 99% of the Guardian responsibility. So so there are three things basically that the Guardian does. The first thing is it spends treasury spends. It does treasury spends. Then the other thing it does is it can change some PDAO settings. And the last thing it can do is effectively it can set the penalty rate, but that's not necessarily implemented. The actual penalty system's not implemented, but we could set a penalty rate. So that's the last bit. So out of those three, two of those then go to the protocol DAO, on-chain power setting. So the PDAO from then on will have the power to do treasury spends and reoccurring spends and all of that sort of stuff. The PDAO will be able to change the settings by themselves. The only thing you won't be able to change is this penalty setting, which that's mainly because we need to review what we're doing with that going forward. That may or may not exist. We're going to have to see. It depends on stuff that it depends on the roadmap essentially. So the two important ones, the two ones that happen most often in terms of settings and treasury spends, they're given over to the go over to the PDAO. The only caveat to that is that in actual fact the PDAO will still hold that power. Sorry, the PDAO Guardian will still, I should say Guardian. The Guardian will still have that power for a short term after launch. That is mainly just as a transitionary thing. At some point we will turn that off so that we no longer have that, or essentially turn Bootstrap off. We would turn PDAO Bootstrap off, which means that we will no longer have that power. There's some logistical reasons and security reasons why we want to do it that way, but that's kind of the thing. From turning Bootstrap off, the PDAO will be on its own. It will be able to do those things, and we won't be able to do them from the Guardian. So that's that.
A little exciting, a little scary. It's like taking the training wheels off the bike here. The PDAO better
definitely is.
Yeah.
Even just deploying this testnet, it's funny because even just deploying this testnet, we suddenly realize, hang on a minute, the PDAO will have full control over the testnet.
Over your testnet.
and it's not real money as well, so it's like even and so actually I should say that it is taking the training wheels off, but there are safeguards in place. So there are a few things. So for example, the PDAO can change settings, but there are maxims and mins in there to mainly to stop accidental accidental changes, but also just to protect in terms of if the PDAO system ever got kind of like exploited or whatever, then there's safeguards in place there as well. So it is definitely taking the training wheels off in terms of governance. The PDAO will have on-chain power. I mean, that's we at Rocket Pool, we're a decentralized protocol. This is what decentralized governance looks like. So that it's definitely exciting and mildly scary at the same time.
Wow. Okay, well, definitely exciting. Anything else on Houston that you want to cover today before we go on to Saturn?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that we will have a Medium article out. I'll in this announcement, I'm going to try and be quite elaborate in terms of if you want to participate in the beta, these are the things you should do, or at least this is how you kick things off and that sort of thing. So I'll give some instructions in there. But one of the key things I want to point out is that before we go to mainnet, way before we go to mainnet, we will have a Medium article out that will outline what node operators should expect and what they should do when we release Houston. The main important thing is to initialize your voting power and to set your delegate. That will be the thing that will be really important for node operators to do when we release Houston, because actually one of the key things is that the PDAO voting thing won't be turned on from day one. We need a certain amount of the vote power to be initialized before we can turn it on. So that's a key kind of like point. So that's why I say that initializing your voting power is going to be quite important. But yeah, we'll lay that out in the Medium article so that everyone's across what they need to do, and then we'll go from there.
Excellent. And it sounds like you definitely need node operators to be the testnet node operators. And so
Yes.
putting that call out and I don't know, maybe suggest dropping some points or something like that to those that participate in the testnet would be one way.
Points, yeah, that's right. Yeah, actually, the other thing that I should highlight is there's actually website changes coming as well. So there's a whole bunch of new things you can do on the website. So with Houston, you can I've already mentioned you can stake ETH on behalf of a node, so you can credit a node with ETH. That's on that'll be on the website, so you can do that. You can you can already do this, but stake RPL on behalf of as well. You'll be able to set and unset and change your RPL withdrawal and confirm your RPL withdrawal address. You'll be able to claim rewards because the RPL withdrawal address can claim rewards, so it has to be a website feature now. You'll be able to claim rewards from the website. You'll be able to and actually if you're one of the things is if there are any like management committee members, obviously reoccurring payments will be a thing. So the PDAO will set up a reoccurring payment, for example, to the GMC, Ken, and they'll set up this GMC reoccurring payment, and then the GMC members or the GMC multi-sig or whatever can then claim those rewards on or not all rewards, but those payments, those disbursements on that reoccurring basis. So that that whole thing is open for testing as well. So there's a whole heap of stuff coming. It's going to be really cool to get out there.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to that Medium article, and yeah, it is a big change to totally start giving all the power to the PDAO here. So I'm excited, a little hesitant, a little nervous, but definitely excited. So So let's maybe talk, and I know your focus has been basically on Houston and probably will have to be on Houston coming forward here, but we're also very much excited about Saturn. And I wondered if, since your last update, is there any further updates on Saturn? Has Kane been able to break away to look at megapools at all, or any thoughts on Saturn?
Yeah. So Kane's been working. I think he's been mostly working on Saturn and megapools now. So he's been adjusting the design based on based on max EB. So max EB is the max. What is it? Max max effective balance. That's it. Thank you. So max effective balance. So max effective balance is an Ethereum feature or EIP that will very likely be in the next hard fork. So he is adjusting based on that because that does actually change things slightly. So he's been adjusting the megapool design basically based on that. So he's gone through that now. He's doing a review with Fornax and Joe and Thomas probably Friday, I think. So he's going to do a review and stuff with them to shake out anything that we need to do. I think the next step after that is to probably document and put that out to the community to be able to see and review. And then it's going to be figuring out how we put this together and develop it. Well, actually, there'll probably be a bit more of a review process. It'll take a week or so for the community to kind of get on top of it. But yeah, then we'll start as I said, we've already got a prototype, but it was based on a pre-EB sort of thing. Now this is going to be post-EB probably. So we'll work on getting that kind of developed. But no, it's pretty exciting actually. Max EB makes things a lot simpler from a design perspective. So we'll get that out so that everyone can kind of have a look at it.
That's kind of maybe a good segue that kind of ties in. Maybe it's partly Saturn, maybe it's partly Houston. But there was a question that was raised in trading, and I apologize, I forget who asked it, but it was a really good question. And it brought up the fact that there's actually an RPIP 37 that says the following. It says each year the core protocol team must facilitate a prioritization discussion with the Rocket Pool community. And then it further says, there should be, quarterly updates on the roadmap and kind of a time frame here. And I wonder now, as you're starting to, like obviously you're launching Houston, but working on Saturn, where do you see those requirements kind of coming in here? Are you hoping to come up with a roadmap for Saturn 1, Saturn 2, and kind of the tokenomics changes, or how does all this play in terms of coming up with a roadmap and sharing it with the community for discussion?
So obviously, back in the day, we would go away, spend a lot of time, brainstorming, and then eventually present a roadmap. But that's not what we do today, and I think that's good. I think we've definitely evolved to the point most of our roadmap stuff is bottom up. Well, let's say bottom up. Anyway, it's driven a lot by the community. Each of those things are individual elements. The only thing that we need to do is to combine them into one vision that takes all those elements and puts them into something that is buildable, essentially buildable at a particular deadline. That's really what the roadmap is going to be. And so essentially it's going to be us kind of release planning. So we've kind of started doing that, taking some of the elements that are being proposed and figuring out how we would lay them out into kind of like discrete releases. Some of it will depend on what gets PDAO approval. So actually that's one thing that I've been meaning to do, but Houston has been intense this week, but is to have a chat with some of the key people in governance around the timeline for the governance stuff, for the tokenomics changes and that sort of thing. So that's that's definitely a consideration. Our element of feeding into that is this legal stuff. We're really trying to lock down the legal team to go through some of the options with them and to see some of the legal aspects of these. They're a bit hard to lock down, but they are kind of the best in the business, so we're kind of giving them a bit of slack. But they are a bit hard to lock down, but we are locking them down in terms of when we can go through and review the options in terms of the legal stuff. I don't necessarily see that as a blocker for the governance, although it is definitely information that would feed into the governance process. So I think, we're trying to get that element done as quickly as we can, but it's difficult when you're kind of relying on third parties, and particularly lawyers who tend to they have their own timelines. So yeah, we'll kind of like deal with that and build that into the system, in terms of the governance process. In terms of like development wise, that's not really holding us back. Megapools is by far the biggest piece, as I kind of like said before. Megapools is by far the biggest piece. The other pieces are much smaller technically. They're just much larger, from a governance perspective. So yeah, I think I don't see necessarily a huge problem with the time in terms of that.
Let me ask a question I think I asked last time, which is, and it's very challenging. I give you all the utmost respect for trying to coordinate all these various pieces that have to come together and kind of form an semblance of a plan, as a roadmap for Saturn 1 and for Saturn 2, and timing and kind of dependencies and so forth. But in terms of like the community here, how long do we have to kind of decide these tokenomic issues? I know there's a number of RPEPs in draft form that are mainly fleshed out. There might be a few remaining things that I know that the folks there, Samus and Val, are kind of debating a little bit, or still fleshing out a little bit. But ideally, in your mind, when would you like to have kind of clarity about the votes on these things as to which way the PDAO wants to go? Is there some target date that you would ideally like to have resolution about the direction of the PDAO by?
So it's very it's not arbitrary, but it's certainly so. I think it would be good to have a resolution by the time we get into a really stable space with megapools, because once we have megapools, we'll be eyeing off the next thing we want to be working on, and so ideally we would have some governance locked down on those other elements, so that we can start working on them. It's not a big deal, because we could work on those elements pre-governance decision, but that could cause a bit of churn if if the governance doesn't go through or whatever. So that is, I would prefer the governance be locked down by the time we finish by the time we're in a stable state in terms of megapools. On that, I don't know. I'd have to kind of like talk to Kane in terms of his thoughts on like the timeline for megapools. Like roughly, it's tricky because we also need design review from the community on megapools. So I would say like 4 to 6 weeks. By then we need to have some governance locked down on the other elements, so that we can start working on those other elements once we it's in a stable state.
Okay, yeah, I think that's very helpful to just kind of set some anticipated targets, right? That way we can all be kind of working to some converging point on the on the calendar to kind of get the team what it needs to continue to be as efficient as possible at moving forward in Saturn here. Let me ask a couple other questions that are in here, kind of some random ones that are in here. Let me back up for a second on the website that you'd mentioned. I know one other topic that came up here was, I guess, perhaps the formula that we were using to calculate the APR returns, and I don't know if it was just node operators or rETH and so forth. But any comments about the work about trying to revise the estimation calculations on the Rocket Pool website?
Yeah, so Nick's been working on that a little bit, and definitely has been in the discussion around that. So I think where we've landed is that we are, so at the moment I think we're using like a model to try to kind of estimate the APR, but depending on, because it's a model, it's an estimate. I think we're going to instead of it, that the reason why it's a model is because we wanted it to be interactive. We wanted them to be able to change dials and kind of like suit their own and sort of thing to be able to do it, and that's why we had to use kind of like a model. I think where we've landed is that that's too much. That's too much inconsistency. So I think we're essentially going to just revert back to just providing an APR. And so, laying out what the assumptions are and providing like an APR for the actual APR that people are getting. So I think that's where we've kind of like landed, because doing a model, you can do the model in like 15 different ways, and nobody like we had a consultation process with people in the community to develop that model. So we worked with the community to try and get the right model, but people are complaining about it. So I think it's probably better that we just revert to essentially showing what the live APR is instead of like an average. Sorry, probably, and again that's going to be like an average APR, but showing what the average APR is rather than having this sort of like calculator thing. I think that's why we've kind of landed.
Yeah, I could see that the modeling is nice, but you kind of have to know what you're doing to set the settings at a reasonable thing. And unless you're an expert already, you probably don't know where to place the sliders to make it a realistic projection, right? So I could definitely see that.
Yeah, and I think one of the key elements of it is we wanted to break down the rewards to show where the rewards come from, and you can only do that with a model. You can't do that with the overall APR, because the overall APR just combines everything together. So that's why we wanted it to break it down. But it's inconsistent. So we'll bundle it up. We might get complaints that we're not seeing the individual elements, but I think it's probably better. It's a better gauge for people than probably what we've got.
Okay, perfect. And then a couple other random questions here. You probably can't see anything, but anything new with StarkNet that you can share?
No. There's nothing new. I've kind of said it as much as I can. I can say soon TM.
And then another kind of related question there for it. One of the just have is like, what's the best list to use there? And I did reach out recently to rate it, and I don't know if they gave a straight answer, but kind of a roundabout answer that they were kind of like, well, if you could find a better way to get a list and so forth. Any any thoughts of having the team kind of engage with some of these list providers like Rated to try to get a little bit better list? Or, I think they were trying to identify one that was rocket pullers that were home stakers and not contracting their node out to services like all nodes.
Yes, so we've engaged directly with Rated on that topic. Basically, I said, basically, I've said that we need to. Oh, basically, I put the StarkNet situation to them. I said, that their data didn't necessarily reflect our node operators, and so can we have a chat on how we can iron that out so that you guys actually do, kind of have that data accuracy and all of that sort of thing. I've been ignoring Telegram a little bit this week, but I will get back into that so that we can start to move that along.
Yeah, I'm laughing at a comment on the previous one. I should have taken off the that you can share bit there. Excellent. Yeah, no, thank you very much for continuing to have that advocacy for the rocket pull node operators. I do think it does help, and I see value in the team trying to work with some of these list providers to help make the list as accurate and as complete as possible. Because the hope is that a number of node operators would be eligible as Ethereum validators for future airdrops, and so that can be viewed very much as a benefit to the community. So thank you for your continued service and the team's service in trying to engage on those topics.
No problem.
Yeah, a couple questions just internally that came up here, and I guess a chat that had started earlier today. But somebody had asked a question about maybe are there any plans to add additional moderators to the Discord here? In particular, they're looking for an EU-friendly moderator, and I think maybe what precipitated this is it just does seem to be a swarm of scammers coming in at various times, and Kron and Fornax and others are really good at helping out at swatting them and kicking them out. But it seems like maybe there's a gap around the EU times. Any thoughts on that, or has anyone approached the team about that?
No, I haven't heard that. I will have a chat. I'll have a chat with Dave and see what he thinks about that, because he tends to drive a lot of the Discord stuff. Yeah, I'll have a chat with him, what he thinks. I think some of the team members are kind of active around there, so we do tend to pitch in with that. But I get what you mean. That as it definitely gets late for us, that's going to be harder. Yeah, I'll have a chat with him, see. Let me know if there's. Yeah, I'll have a chat with Dave first, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I certainly have spent my fair amount of time trying to flag people for Quran and that sort of stuff, and the amount of effort he does is truly amazing in protecting our Discord. But I did think he can't be 24 hours 7 days a week. So definitely appreciate that. And then the only other question I did see, there were some other ones, but I'll leave those. But the other one was about creating the ability to create threads in the research channel. That one came up, and I know Mav was having me test to see if I can. So it sounds like he's already working on trying to allow the community to set threads in the research channel.
Yes, Mav's mentioned that, and I think we're kind of working through some of that. I think we turned threads off to avoid like the support scams, but then I think we've probably gone a bit too far. We need to kind of like just anyway. We'll figure that out. That's with Mav.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I didn't know there was a reason to the madness there. Let me then cover just a few other things here on the bi-weekly here. I know we've gone kind of long here, but let me just cover a couple of things that are in there. We've covered about half of them already in today's topic, but there were a couple of integrations for the folks that are listening here. rETH holders can now participate in Miso's token launch. And so there's a link to that. So that seems like an opportunity there. And there's the incentives have now ramped up for the rETH liquidity pool on Polygon ZK EVM. And just a little bit of word of caution, make certain you go to the ZK EVM and not the POS chain. There's a couple of different Polygons, so go to the right one. But Mav has included a link in the biweekly for that as well. I don't know, Mav, if you're still listening here, if there's anything in addition to integrations that you want us to cover, and then maybe we'll highlight some of the marketing.
Hey Ken, yes, still here. We can probably jump to the marketing. One point that would be a good segue is the Miso token launch. Obviously, as always, everyone needs to do their own research on this, but I did join the team on a Twitter space recently, and there's a link in there from the media and marketing section. Another good thing to listen to is Langer's being interviewed on the Beefy pod from Beefy Finance, and that stemmed from ETH Denver, actually. That's where we caught up with the Beefy guys.
Oh, excellent. And that was recorded, so folks can click on the link and they'll listen to the recorded Twitter space.
Yeah, that's the one. It is recorded. I think they've got it on YouTube as well.
Okay, perfect. And then I see there's a couple other ones in the marketing. Looks like Everstake has created a guide for using rETH on Eigenlayer, right? And I guess that's a key thing here is that you can actually restake if you're coming in as the LST holder with Eigenlayer. We still don't have the ability as a node operator to sign up using an Eigenpod. There's still, I guess, a proposal with GMC to kind of explore that opportunity or do some research on that area. Any other topics in the media and marketing that you feel we should cover today?
Yeah, definitely restaking is continuing to be a very strong narrative, that's for sure. The Ledger post actually about staking through Rocket Pool was good to see. We've been talking to Ledger kind of off and on for a while now, ever since they did that kind of integration soft launch. When was it? Maybe last year? Anyway, it's always good to see some co-marketing come out from some of the household names like Ledger. A recent guest was Flat Money. I think that's a recording worth listening to. Jasper hosted them a couple weeks ago. So they are a protocol building variation of a stablecoin on Base. So if you're doing stuff on Base with rETH, or if you're into the whole DeFi world, I would recommend listening to that. And we do have some, I think we've got 3 guests lined up for the next few community calls, which is good. One is going to be building off that integration that you mentioned earlier, Ken, in terms of the Polygon ZK EVM liquidity incentives that were launched by the IMC. So if you want to learn more about that, we're probably going to have those guys on next week. Following week, it's going to be another stablecoin synthetics protocol that have integrated rETH, building on rETH. So both Flat Money and this other protocol exclusively use rETH, which is pretty cool to see. And probably one of the reasons why is another point in the media and marketing section about some of the coverage on how rETH held up relatively well recently when there are a few wobbles in the market and some price volatility. Yeah, the price of rETH held pretty well by comparison. And I think that's everything covered off.
Yeah, I'll just take the remaining time here to just mention the two items in governance. I'd be remiss if I didn't, which is the GMC is actually requesting feedback about funding priorities. One of the key points the GMC has been working on this past year is, obviously the grants and bounties, but many of the GMC members have commented that it would be very helpful to have a forward-looking, prospective budget in terms of, out of the amount of funding that the GMC has, how much of it should we spend on administrative duties or development purposes or advertising purposes, et cetera. And so this is a really good opportunity for the community as a whole to comment about what our priorities should be in terms of, doing a little bit of forward-looking budgeting in the GMC. And then I also noticed in the governance section that RPIP 39, this is the one that allows kind of a bounty hunter payment, individuals in the community that assist individuals that go after the bounties or claim the bounties. We are finding that there's a tremendous amount of knowledgeable programs out there, but they may not have the background knowledge of Rocket Pool. They may not know some of the nuances or some of the structural design of Rocket Pool, if you will. And a lot of community members could be very helpful at helping them successfully claim these bounties by coaching them or providing counseling to them, or just pointing them in the right direction, being assistance to them. And this RPIP proposal allows those community members that help engage with the bounty claimants to also get rewarded. So I encourage you to take a look at that. I guess the RPIP's already closed, right? It's voted, right?
I think there's actually 2 hours left to run, but I guess that's a technicality. It's going to close shortly. Yeah.
Well, excellent. This was, I thought, a very, very, very exciting community call here. It was great to hear from Joe. You need to let him out of the out of the dungeon a little bit more often. But it's great to hear that he's done with version 2 and can actually come back and share what he created with it. Langers, I'm very excited to hear about all the things Houston, especially this week. It looks like an amazing week with a lot of deliverables due this week, and even further excited about the continual development and engagement with the community about Saturn. And Mav, as always, just tremendous activity out in the marketing and the media content that's out there. I don't know how you can keep producing these bi-weeklies like this. It just an amazing amount of work being done over the past week here.
Thanks for good call.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to y'all, and I'll be glad to stay on a little bit after the recording stops here. And for anyone that still wants to chit chat a little bit, I'll be here. But thank you for all the team members that came and joined.
Cheers, Ken. Thank you very much. Great call, mate.